Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to today's bonus. Guys, don't forget about tonight, Saturday Nightmares live from New York, 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have a lot of fun. I hope to see you all there. But that's not why we're here right now. We are here for some terrifying encounters. Before we get into those, though, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go, and folks, they do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into today's bonus, shall we? Today's first encounter. I'm sharing this from the state of Michigan. I was 67 years old back in March of 2023, and I've hunted in my early days and fished all of my life. I spent countless all-nighters on a sandbar catching catfish before the sun came up. In my 20s through 40s, in a tree stand with my bow, then migrated to my .44 mag hand cannon for whitetail. I was never happy hunting until I reached the deepest, darkest dungeons of the forest or timber that I was in. When I moved to Michigan from Iowa after my wife had passed, it was like a treasure trove of outdoor activity. I met and remarried my now wife in 2004. We live on the east side of Lake Michigan toward the tip of the thumb. Lately, I fish very little and stopped hunting because of a intense pressure and my age. Just really not fun anymore. But I continue to competitively shoot. After moving to Michigan, I started hearing stories about this Michigan Dogman and just blew it off. 5 years ago, there was a sighting by a man named Joe Barger, a semi-truck driver that was hauling a load in Upper Peninsula. He stated that this creature tried to crawl into his moving truck. He stated that he shot this creature in the head and watched it fall to the ground as his truck sped away. About 3 or 4 months ago, I read a local story about a dogman sighting just north of us in a small town called Port Hope. We live on 4.5 acreage with a very high banked creek that flows behind our old farmhouse. We have chickens, goats, pigs, 2 cows, barn cats, and dogs. I believe this was early October of 2022. I was out in the back by the creek when I heard what I thought was a faint growl. I didn't think much of it until I got back inside and asked which one of the dogs had been outside. My youngest replied that they were all inside and no dogs had been out. My wife looked at me and asked, "Why? What's wrong?" She asked if I was okay. She said the color simply drained out of my face. She was concerned because she knows that there is very little that scares me. I told her that I was out back and I thought I heard one of the dogs growling. She said they've been inside well before I even went outside. I grabbed my .44 and a flashlight and went out back. I didn't hear or see anything else. I cautiously went out back again the next night, just to look around, and heard that growl again, but this time it was a lot louder and sounded like it was right behind me, like feet away. I quickly turned around and pointed my .44 in that direction and saw nothing, but the lower branches of this pine tree was moving and there was no wind. I quickly moved back into the house. My wife looked at me again and said, "What?" My wife is from Michigan. I Never met my father-in-law, because he had died of cancer in the early 80s. I told her what I experienced the last 2 nights, and the color drained from her face. She stated, "You can't be serious." I told her, "Does it look like I'm joking?" She walked over and sat in her chair and began telling me a story told to her by her dad about a deer camp many years ago. She said that her dad told her of a time at deer camp when the men saw a dog-like creature that ran like a man. She said that her dad never went hunting again after that. Anyway, when I go outside at night to feed the critters, I carry my .44. We live on a flat farmland of that thumb. The biggest thing that scares me is the creek. You can spit and hit the creek. It's that close. The scary part about the creek is that it has high banks on both sides. Even a very tall creature could walk down the center of that creek for miles unseen in any direction because the sides are so high. You would never see it. I wasn't sure if I needed to tell anyone this because I actually didn't see anything other than the moving branches and hearing that horrible growl. But what I experienced was not normal, and it was definitely real. Today's second encounter. I just turned 60 years old last November. Anyway, when I was either 14 or 15, a buddy and I went on a hunting trip in Burlington Northern Railroad tracks between the town of Dayton and Wedren, Illinois. We had just received a heavy snowfall, maybe 10 to 12 inches. We made it all the way up to where the Weldron silica pits were. We turned and went across the tracks, came back the other side, and we were pretty well gassed because it was a long walk in deep snow. Anyway, we get about a half a mile from the cemetery, and we weren't talking. We're just pretty well winded. I hear something growling and snarling. My friend walked up behind me, and we were both looking. There was a large canine creature along a 4 or 5 foot strand barbed wire fence. It was on the other side along the timberline. There was a big orange moon coming up on the east side of the Fox River. The river runs from north to south. Anyway, it moved toward the edge of the fence. I had a 20 gauge single shot, and I believe my friend had a 12 gauge single shot. I had mine cocked, and I imagine he had his as well. Then, as it reached the fence, it stood up, and it was standing about 4 or 5 feet over the top of this fence. It was huge and simply terrifying. It had these bright red eyes. It was as red as could be, and it was not from the moonlight because the moon was still on the east side of the river coming up. We took off. We usually cut down the east side of the cemetery and went down through the woods back to the Burlington Northern Track, but we were too scared to go that way. So we went around the cemetery on the west side and went all the way to his house. His dad and buddies were down in the basement playing cards. We ran down there and told them what had just happened to us, and of course they didn't believe us. It was absolutely terrifying. Yeah. I would say, at 17 having my encounter and just seeing what we saw in the woods in front of us, and then as we were pulling out, seeing the creature standing on the tree line, that's still strikes a little fear in my heart, and every once in a while I have a nightmare about that. I could never imagine having to run for my life from one of these creatures. I mean, that just gives you a whole new take on fear, I guess. So, very, very terrifying. Now, one thing I really want to talk to you about before we go any further is about my trip up north to where Tom Messick disappeared. I saw a lot of you with some great ideas. Bring an EMF. Bring a recording device. And you know what, guys? I'm going to take that advice. Next nice day we have, I'm going to pack up my bag. I'm going to throw it all in there, and I'm going to head up. And I'm going to go to that location where I believe something occurred. I really truly believe the way those trees are tilted, all the rest are like this. And then they're tilted in that little kind of section where I truly believe Tom Messick was taken. And then, of course, right across from where those trees are bent is where I saw that tree. The tree was about yay big around, broke, like something broke it off, and it didn't look like natural damage. About 7.5 feet off the ground. I'm 6 foot, and I put my arm extended all the way, and the tip of my middle finger touched the lowest part of the break on that tree. So that would put that tree maybe about 8 feet, if I had to guess. So I think I'm really going to just go up and not really have a seance, but just have a little bit of an investigation. And I want to thank you guys for suggesting those things, because I'm going to take it to heart and do it. So thank you. Today's next experience, third experience, is one that I hope I never have the opportunity of meeting or running into, even armed. That's how terrifying this is to me. There are just certain things that really scare certain people and people in general. We have our own fears. And this is one of them, and we actually talked about something like this on Saturday's live stream. So, here it is. The night of February 27th, 2017, in the early mornings, I was staying at a Best Western in Big Bear, California. Roughly 12:35 a.m., I walked to my car alone to retrieve my luggage. Now, it had been snowing, and it was extremely dark. My car was facing the country road. And when I hit the unlock button on my fob, the parking interior lights came on. This allowed me to see two eyes reflecting in the middle of the road, maybe 10 or 15 feet from my location. At first I thought it was a deer. Now I've lived in Colorado, and I've been accustomed to seeing wildlife. I instantly stopped and remained as still as I could because I didn't want to scare off what I thought was this deer. As my eyes glanced downwards, I noticed that it was not a deer. It looked like a white, hairless, naked man on all fours. It was at least 4 feet in height on all fours, probably around 15 feet if it stood up. There was a brief moment as our eyes made contact. It then, as quickly as I have ever seen an animal turn around and run as fast as a cheetah away from me, and then straight up a tree. I was frozen in disbelief. I said out loud to myself, "You have to be flippin' kidding me." Just as I was going to convince myself that this could not possibly be happening, it leapt from treetop to treetop, and I could see its full outline as it did so. Now, I've never heard of such a creature, but I found some videos and photos online that looked pretty similar to what I saw. The speed and strength it had was like nothing I had ever seen before. The creature was definitely solid, and it appeared as if it was coming towards me, possibly hunting me. I don't know what stopped it. Was it the lights that went on? This thing had no visible genitalia, and it had very human-like qualities. First, it was a new moon, and I believe it was an eclipse that day as well. There was a creek across the street. I don't know if that has anything to do with my experience, but I was also a day from menstruating. If this had been a huge-eyed gray alien, it would have made more sense. I've heard of those, but this was unlike anything I had ever seen or was familiar with. None of this made sense to me, the speed, the agility of this creature, and there shouldn't be any way that the treetops should have been able to hold the weight of this creature. It appeared to be flashing like a TV going in and out of reception as it sprinted up the tree. It also didn't appear to disrupt the foliage as it went on. I immediately called my dad after I rushed back to my hotel room. My son was asleep, and I was understandably in a state of shock. At this time, no one knew what hotel I was staying in. As I was crying on the phone with my dad, the hotel's phone rang. I answered it, and it was only a dial tone. Then there was a knock at the hotel room door. Once again, there was no one there. At this point, my son woke up due to the commotion, and I told him it was a scary dream. I gave my dad the hotel information, and he advised me to go wait in the lobby with my son as we were leaving. There was another knock, but it was at the back sliding glass door that went out to a private fenced-in patio. This was the one-time encounter, and it's unfortunate that I still live in fear from this experience. I was raised a Christian, and this humanoid doesn't fit into any category which I am familiar with. I don't know why this happened, and what I'm supposed to learn from it. In addition, the hotel phone number, I found out later, has 6 sixes in a row. I don't know if that has anything to do with what happened. I was always taught that demons cannot have a physical body unless it's possessing someone. I can't imagine it flying a spacecraft due to its primal manner. Is it a trans-dimensional being? Nephilim? What was it going to do? Was it coming after me? Why didn't it do what it was set out to do? My previous beliefs about the world and the way things work had been tossed upside down. While it's thought-provoking, it's been very traumatic and has had me in a panic state and distracted, and it's mostly negative. That poor person, that poor woman. Jeez. Tonight's fourth encounter. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a herpetologist. I travel frequently into North Georgia mountains, up into Helen area in the Chattahoochee National Forest. On this day, I was going there to observe some wildlife that I frequently study. This was September of 2016. It was approximately 5 or 6 in the afternoon. And as I was going to my usual sites, I observed that there was no wildlife activity. I didn't notice it at first, but I did later on, and as I was walking, I walked up a ridge and noticed there was something diagonally from me. It was on the ground. It was not moving. It was about 25 feet from it. I moved towards it, and it jumped up and spun around very quickly. I realized, this is something very out of the ordinary, something I had never seen before. And it was sitting there, and it was staring at me, and some minutes had passed. At this point in time, it was making moans and growls. It was making sounds close to that. That's the best way I can describe them. It was man-like. It was approximately 7.5 to 8 feet tall and 4.5 feet shoulder to shoulder. It was very large and bulky. Some may say it was ape-like, but in my opinion, due to my study of various wildlife, it was not anything close to being an ape. It was more like a man. There was absolutely nothing ape about this. Very muscular. The hands, the best I can describe the hands, are about the size 13 or 14, maybe even larger. As far as trying to fit a ring on it, very muscular. I cannot stress this enough. You could see the whites of its eyes. Unlike other creatures, they were squinting and aggressive. The forehead was not ape-like neither. It was more Homo sapien than ape. It did have a full body hair except for its hands and feet. There was hair on its knees and elbows. It had hair like a man. The teeth. I was able to observe the teeth as they were bared most of the time. And it had teeth just like a man. They did have 3 or 4 canine, but they were worn and pretty nasty. I stood in front of this creature for a significant amount of time. I didn't know whether to run or just stand there and do whatever you do. Definitely, this creature could outrun me. Like I was saying, the hands and its skin were tanned. They weren't black. I wouldn't even say dark brown. They were just tan. It did have fingernails, human-like. They didn't have blood on them. I was able to tell. This was all happening, and as I was observing its hand, it was sizing me up. That's the best way I can describe it. Then I picked up a log. I was able to observe that. He was mostly likely right-handed. I know this is going to be hard to believe, but it's true, and it chucked it in my general direction. So it picked up the log. I apologize. I said I. Notice I said him. It did have male sexual organs. I was able to observe that. No tail. It walked upright. It had a brownish reddish hair, matted. I am not 100% sure if it was due to the Georgia clay or if it was its actual color. I was able to observe it was a mix of brown and red. After it chucked the log, at this point in time, I started backing up slowly. It didn't charge me or try to beat me or anything like that. I was slowly backing up. There was a strong stench of body odor. Somewhat like a wet dog, but I'd say probably 100 times stronger. I was backing up and all of this happened within 2 or 3 minutes. And I slowly backed up down the ridge, and eventually I got out of sight, and I made a beeline back to where I had come from. It was definitely real, beyond a shadow of a doubt. It was what some would say was a Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or whatever you want to call it. It was not a man, nor was it an ape. It was not a native creature that is seen every day. Someone may make their own decision about that. That's all I've got to say. There wasn't much to compare it to, but about 400 pounds, the forehead was sunken back and its shoulders were more forward. It didn't have a proper human posture, though. It was definitely leaning more forward than straight up. It's rare to see somebody that would be as muscular as this creature. It was exhibiting more caution and on the verge of aggression. Its eyes, I was able to observe the eyes, did have more of a downright fear, but there was aggressiveness there. The eyes squinted, the breath was rapid, and going by the noises this creature was making, I feel that it was threatened as well. Interesting. Tonight's final encounter. Tonight's final encounter is very horrifying. I truly believe that these folks met 2 different somethings this evening in Maine. Let's get into it. The year was 1981. My friends lived in a very rural cabin near Baxter State Park in Maine. The road was only traveled by the residents. You could drive on it and not expect to see another car. I was driving up there one night as I went around the last bend before reaching the cabin. An 8-foot-tall Sasquatch was standing on the side of the road, and it was massive. It had to be 4 feet across the shoulders with a brownish blonde hair. I then noticed that it was a male. Skin was dark. The face had a long beard and looked both ape-like and human-like. It stood there, motionless, looking at me. I was freaked out when my headlights were on him, and we actually made contact. He wasn't 20 feet from me. I sped past and then into my friend's driveway. I ran into their cabin screaming that I had just seen a huge Bigfoot. A few years later, I bought a small property near Mount Blue State Park in Maine. One winter, a friend was visiting from Utah. My boyfriend and his friends went out on their snowmobiles at night. Later, we were inside the cabin, and we started hearing these bizarre growls, like no noise I had ever heard before or since. The growls were getting louder and louder. Then whatever it was started screaming, literally shaking the cabin. It was right outside. I ran toward the door and placed a board barricading through the loop. As soon as I did that, something was pulling and shaking the door on the other side. Each time we changed our position in the cabin, that part of the cabin would be attacked. We were terrified. My boyfriend had brought a pistol, so I grabbed it. We climbed the ladder to the bedroom. Whatever that thing was, it landed on the roof above us. Its screams were the scariest things you had ever heard. They were impossible to repeat. Just as we thought our lives were over, we could hear the snowmobiles coming back. Whatever that thing was finally took off. We told the guys what had happened, and they went out to look for the tracks. At first, they thought I was crazy until they saw a huge unknown print with long claw marks in the snow. There were deep scratches on the window frames and outside walls. My boyfriend is an experienced hunter and couldn't explain the prints or the deep claw marks. I soon moved out west to California. There is no way I'm staying in that cabin again, let alone in Maine. Well, that's just crazy because Maine is absolutely beautiful. And how are you going to let something like that scare you off? I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. I couldn't imagine being in the protection of your home. You know, even though it's a small cabin, it's still your home. You feel safe there, right? And you're pretty much under attack. Claw marks in the snow, unusual prints. Now, when we hear of Bigfoot, we think of human-like prints, but larger. These were unusual with claw marks. And then there were scratch marks in the walls and windowsills. That, to me, just spells Dogman. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. Your support is what makes this channel continue to grow and go, and what makes it a place for people to want to share their experiences, ideas, and theories. It is truly appreciated, the community you guys have created in the comment section. Thank you. I hope to see you all at tonight's live stream, 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday Nightmares, live from New York. With that being said, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They're out there. They're dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.